Welcome to the Franchise Woman Podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Now, guys, we got lucky today. We're able to snag Kim Gubera for this interview. If you haven't met Kim, you need to. Kim is one of the very few female CEOs in the global hydraulics industry, but she has successfully led PIRTEK USA to the third fastest growing franchise based on unit percentage. Third fastest growing, guys. Kim's leadership is linked to her personal perseverance. She grew up in a low-income, single-parent household. It took her 9 years to finish her education while taking care of her child. Starting in finance, she didn't expect to find herself in franchising. Yet now she harnesses her strength and work ethic as a CEO of a hydraulic hose franchise. Woohoo! Kim, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Wow, that was really impressive. So tell us, Kim, what sparked your interest in franchise?
Well, I will say it was an accident. The the truth of the matter is, but it was a good accident. Back when I was about 23 years old, I got a job working at a landscape company, just doing accounts payable, accounts receivable, which is where I found out I liked accounting. And come to find out, they were part of a national brand under the banner of Valley Crest Companies. And a few years after that, I ended up being with that organization, by the way, for 26 years, 16 of it with a division that they bought called US Lawns. And I ended up transferring there after I got my 4-year degree because I didn't want to move to California and work for the corporate office. So they said, how about working for this division? And I went to US Lawns, and there I had some great mentors, one of them being Ken Hutchison, who's the president of US Lawns today. And he made me learn about franchising, not just accounting and finance. And he did me a great favor because I found out I really enjoyed it.
We love US Lawns. And Kim, it's so interesting that oftentimes the story to franchising is kind of never a direct route. It just never seems to be direct. I'm wondering if you could touch on a little bit. You had a good mentor at US Lawns that made you learn about franchising, but probably really was a large influence in terms of your learning and now stepping into this massive role that you have.
Yes. In fact, I'd still consider Ken one of my mentors today. I still talk to him quite frequently, especially, I started this position, been in it now for 4 full years. And my first year was, 2019. I felt like sometimes I didn't know exactly what I was doing. So you have to have mentors. I have several that I refer to, and he definitely is still one of those people. He's really been, I think, somewhat instrumental on seeing me get to this point. And I always tell people I'm working with a small group of my own employees here today in like our own internal management training program. And I'm forcing them to get a mentor because I just think it has such a great impact on where you go in your career and honestly your life.
Agreed.
That's so important. Sometimes we don't even realize what we need, right? And then having that person in your corner, like a mentor, saying, hey, you need to learn about XYZ, when you already think you have kind of like this robust skill set, not realizing that there's that one thing, oh yeah, there's franchise, right?
Yes, for sure.
Did that
For sure.
you? Did that come
I'm
as
sorry?
a surprise to you did that come as a surprise to you that he wanted you to
Well,
learn about franchise?
yeah, I think so. But it's something that I've kind of mirrored here as well with my own management team, because when you're over a franchise system like we are, you have very professional people in all these different disciplines. So IT, accounting, you have all these different people and they come here to work in those disciplines. And then you go, and by the way, could you also help support these other 125 small businesses and all their employees too? And if you don't understand franchising, I don't think you can really do your job well. And so I've mirrored that same philosophy here with, having some of my people go through the CFE program, through the IFA, so that they can learn about what industry we really are in, which is franchising.
Yeah.
That's great.
So it's interesting, the personal interest that you take in the folks that you work with. Has this always been the case where you want to develop, you want to grow, you want to build a relationship with those teams, or was this also something that was modeled for you?
I think it's something somewhat inherent in my personality. I'd like to consider, myself as somewhat of a servant leader. And so I'm still very connected with many people that worked for me even 15 or so years ago. I've seen them come, mainly in accounting, because that's what I primarily did before PIRTEK. And now they're a controller, or an assistant controller of a place. And sometimes they'll still reach out to me and ask me a question like, what should I do? I'm thinking about changing jobs. So that's something I've always worked at, but I think I have become better at it as I've matured, obviously, both in age and just business experience. And so to me, that's where a lot of the reward comes in, is knowing that, you see someone and you see their ability and what they really could do. And that's kind of exciting if you can help foster that along. And that's not that different than franchising, quite truthfully. So not just with employees, but, you get a lot of people, we get people that have technical experience because we're a technical business. So they might have been an engineer in their former life, right? And they're a degreed engineer, but now they have to become a business person too and manage people. And so we're always trying to fill those holes for them. And it's kind of fun and challenging and then greatly rewarding when you see it happen and all come together.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can you backtrack a little bit for us, for those folks that don't understand everything PIRTEK does? It is kind of a high-tech hydraulic kind of business. So tell us a little bit about that. And also, is it more male oriented than female oriented? And how does that play in everything you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know if I would say high tech, but I would say very technical because it is an industrial franchise. What we offer. Oh, now, excuse me. Sorry. I'm having a technical difficulty.
Yeah, we've had that all morning, haven't we?
We have. Sorry about that. The thing is, so we do both hydraulic and industrial hose repair, and that may seem very specific, but when you find out how much of that work is done in the United States every year, which is about $1.5 billion for hydraulic and $1.5 billion for industrial, you realize that there are hoses all around you. I never had any idea till I came here. But we do have quite a few people in our system that have a technical background. However, because we are a franchise system, that's not required. And so they're implementing a model. And the good news about our model is that it is recession resistant. And we found out also pandemic resistant because of the fact that all that stuff still has to operate. Waste management, construction, those fire trucks. I mean, hoses are on everything. And so it is technical in nature, but we have a lot of people with no technical background. However, I do have to have people here that have technical backgrounds to support that. So it is I would say the majority are male. And I have 20% of my owners are female. Sometimes it's a husband and wife team, but I do have an individual owner that is a female. And we're trying to get more. because they also have backgrounds in technical, and they like these things as well. In you asked the question, has that played into it? I will tell you, I thought it would, but it absolutely has not. Now, I can say not even once. And I think that's a great story. And I think it comes from the culture of the company overall, because there wasn't that. It's not like I had to break through any kind of glass ceiling. It just, the company was not operated by that, and or in that way. So here in the US, which is what I oversee in US and Canada, 50% of my management team are female, and 20% of my owners here in the US are female. So I think we'll see that grow, as we see engineering grow as a field for women, and also with STEM programs and things like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, definitely on the right platform, the Franchise Women podcast, to reach some more women. Love that, 20% women. Can you talk to us a little bit about your role in the company? Because I think it's kind of interesting that you're a master franchisee for US and Canada, is it?
Yes, that is correct. So about 8 years ago, the founding family that founded PIRTEK, they came back to the US and bought back the rights, the master franchise rights for the US and Canada. And that's the part that I oversee today. And we do operate as our own separate entity. But of course, we interact a lot with Australia. That's where the business started. And that's what we guess you would call the mothership.
Yeah.
We do interact with them a lot. And they've been doing their business for 43 years. So we learn a lot from that, right? And we capitalize on that. So right now, when they did that back 8 years ago, and what we're doing today is really trying to saturate the US now, such as what they've done in Australia, where they have a few over 100 franchises, but because of their population and the way the density is set up there, they're in all of the populous areas. So, they see the US as a real opportunity to grow, because we're only in 29 states so far. So we still have a lot of ground to cover, if you will. And so this is where a lot of their focus is, as far as continuing to grow the brand.
Yeah. So 40 plus years they've been in this business. It's still family owned though, right?
It is still family owned, except for the UK. That is owned by private equity and has been for many, many years. But all the other countries, I think there's a total of 20 countries that PIRTEK is in. Obviously, some of them are small, but all of that is owned by the remaining of that is owned by the family.
Well, I'm sure there are positives and negatives to working with a family-owned business. I lean towards the positive because I think it's a cool thing. But tell me how you work within that. Do you love it? What are the benefits? What do you see that comes out of someone working with a family-owned franchisor?
Sure. Let me just back up, if I could, 1 second to correct something, though. It's not just the UK. It's UK and Europe is owned by private equity. So we think of it as UK, but it's that whole group.
Right.
So to answer your question, I, having come from US Lawns, which was owned, it's now owned by Brightview, which is owned by KKR. But I think it was around 2014 is when it was a family business and had been for 60 plus years. Wow. So I went from a family business to a family business. And honestly, I think I was just fortunate that I ended up in a lot of similarities between the two, high integrity, and these are just their business philosophies, doing things the right way, high quality, high excellence. And so to me, that I think one reason that it was as easy a move as it was, which it wasn't easy. So because after 26 years someplace, it's hard to make a change, but it felt familiar. And so honestly, I don't have a lot of negatives about it. I'm more focused, and nothing against private equity, but this fits more with me because there is not only is there more of a focus, I feel, on relationships, both with employees and franchise owners, more of a vested interest personally, but there's also the whole factor of decision making. Decision making in our organization can happen pretty quick. And I think, especially in the situation of 2020, that's important. You know, it's not that we don't have chains of commands and policies and all that, we do, but I can pick up the phone and talk to the owner if I need to immediately. And I don't think everybody sitting in my seat has that. Maybe they do, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they have that ability. And I think one of the best stories that I like to tell on why I think it's great has to do with happened in 2020, in March of 2020. And I'll never forget, I was standing in my house in Orlando, and we had just found out that the lockdowns were going to happen, which meant that all my people on the road could no longer be out there supporting franchise owners.
Wow.
And we just started kind of preparing for the worst. We did not know what kind of impact it was going to have on the business overall. Fortunately, it ended up being minimal as a whole, but we didn't know that. And I remember getting a call from one of the owners, because they were actually in Australia. And they told me, you are to keep everybody employed no matter what happens. Now, this is before PPP. Okay, so this was before a lot of those things came around. But for me, who had only been in the seat of CEO for just over a year, facing a pandemic that we had not faced before as a country, that gave me a lot of comfort. And I think it gave a lot of our franchise owners comfort as well, because we didn't reduce our staff. I never did have to. In fact, we increased our staff during the pandemic. So it's having things like that. It may seem like a simple story, but for me, it resonates, kind of everything in a nutshell of how we were able to move in a 15-minute conversation what our plan was going forward.
Wow, that is so impressive. I happen to have a sweet spot for family-run businesses. I mean, it's just nothing, there's nothing like feeling like you're going to work and that's family too, you know, and bringing those values in. It's such a beautiful thing. So how do you perpetuate those family values with your franchisees? How do you build those relationships?
Well, I think I had a really good opportunity because there was some relationship repairing that needed to happen after that ownership change happened in 2014 for whatever reasons. I'm not saying anything negative, but there had just not been as much focus as I think the family and myself put on the relationship with the franchise owner. I look at it specifically, if you really want to get down to the raw of where it comes from. First of all, I think it's the best way of doing business. I am a professional person and I like to keep things professional, but I also know there's professional relationships as well, and honoring those and making sure that they're, you know, we manage them with integrity and follow through and excellence and all those things. But I think because with franchising, in many cases, someone has put their life investment or their retirement or whatever on the line. And I want them at some level to know us and know my team and know how dedicated we are to them, and vice versa. And then I think what happens with that, when you are able to get those relationships in place, and please understand, I'm not saying it's all unicorns and rainbows, because it's not. But if you can get the majority of people feeling that feeling, we call it Team PIRTEK. That's what we call it here, right? We don't call it the family or anything. We call it Team PIRTEK. When I can feel Team PIRTEK, then when we do have, rubs or disagreements that are inherent in franchising, it's going to happen. If I have a relationship there, it's going to make that a lot easier to work through. And again, it's not perfect, but it makes it a lot easier to work through. And that's where a lot of the reward comes, I feel like, is having that and then seeing people be successful. And the family does have that that's very important to them. They have a lot of legacy owners. So the father passes it on to his son or daughter business. And I mean, it just keeps going, right? For after 42 years, they see that. So they enjoy that part of it. And I do as well. And I think that's where a lot of the synergies for me working for them comes from.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was giggling to myself because, you know, you talked about that rub. It happens between corporate and franchisees, but it also happens in families, right? Where we have, I don't know, our feelings hurt or whatever, happens. But there is something about when you see others as an extended family, there's a different level of responsibility. There's a different level of interaction. The values, as Tracy pointed out, are that we take care of one another, that we are here for one another, that we love seeing each other succeed and be included in things. So I have a leaning towards family-owned businesses too, for all of those reasons. They're much more, the culture that is created is much more fulfilling than a lot of other cultures. So one of the things we talked about offline that was very impressive, and I saw your eyes light up, was the importance of relationship. And even as a CEO, how you make that top priority in your life. And I know you're busy because trust me, I had to really work around your schedule. But you always make time, and relationship is most important to you. So what are some things that you do to let your franchisees and your employees and your team know how important they are, and how do you go about consciously, deliberately building a relationship?
Yeah, I think it's different for each situation. It's not like I have a checklist to go down and say, have I talked to so-and-so today? But I think it's paying attention, paying attention if something's going on in their life, good or bad. For instance, if I see that someone had their first, record year, or, that's a kind of a milestone, I'll give them a quick call or a text. It doesn't always have to be a call. It can be a text. Or if I know that, they're struggling with something, whether it be a health issue or something like that, just trying to make that extra connection and remembering what's going on. Everybody here knows that I'm a big advocate of, unfortunately, one of my franchise owners right now is in the hospital, and everybody knows that that's something I want to know. I must know, if something major is going on with someone, and I don't do it out of, I got to tick that box. But I just think that's so important. I want people to ask me stuff like if my spouse were ill, or if I had been ill. And so it's just, that to me is the core of it. The business part, and I don't want to make it sound like we're not a professional organization, because we certainly are. Yeah. But those little extra things, I do think it means a lot. And what the message I think that it sends primarily to our owners, our franchise owners, is that we're paying attention and we do care about it. And one of the things that I did, we didn't speak about this, but I think it's important to mention, in 2019, when I became the CEO, the first thing that I did is I went and saw every single one of my existing owners at the time. And I sat down with them to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of their PIRTEK journey. And I learned a ton from that. It was probably more beneficial for me than it was for them, but I wanted them to have that opportunity. And that kind of started the foundation, I think, for a lot higher level of trust within our organization.
Trust becomes the foundation of everything else.
Yeah.
Tracy, I know you have a question, but what is really fascinating as I listen to you, Kim, is we typically put CPAs and numbers people in a bucket, and we say they're left-brained and they're schedule oriented and they are checklists, but everything you are sharing with me so far, sharing with us, is very heart related. It's I want to have a relationship with my team. I want to have a relationship with my franchisees. I want to know what's going on in their lives. I care. I love them. I'm a servant leader. So it's just this beautiful two parts of you, which is probably why you're such a great CEO, that can look at things rationally and through an ROI lens, but also sees that it's human beings that are running these businesses.
Yeah, I have to tell you, it's a funny story. A couple months ago, I got I had an issue with something, and I was helping out the accounting team, and I had a spreadsheet, this massive spreadsheet to work on, and I was so excited, like, 'cause I do enjoy doing that stuff. But what I have found about myself, and I would say up until I came here, that was my probably 90% of my focus. But what I have found is I enjoy this other part as well. And I hate to say this because I don't like to be vain, but I'm good at it. And I, as a CPA person, I never thought I would be, right? Because I was very black and white. And so it's stretched me a lot in my growth, but I think in a good way. And so even though I always had that servant leadership mindset, it was more with the people right around me. And then now it has to grow a lot. But I wish I had more time to spend on that, which is part of my goal for next year. I just shared with my team is to pass off more of the day-to-day duties so that I can spend more time doing those things and doing strategic things for the company.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me because by you starting out as a CPA, yet finding that you have all of these amazing relationship building skills, it kind of reminds me of what we spoke about. And I think it might have been offline prior to the start of the podcast about how you really you really enjoy and there's a big push towards helping people find those skills, right? Like they may have come in as an engineer, but now we have to help them find the skills to be more of a business owner, more of those business skills, as opposed to the engineer skills, because they may not necessarily, like you said, need those technical skills as much anymore. But I think it really speaks to that, like you actually having experienced this pivot within yourself that, hey, I'm not just good with numbers, I'm great with people too. And then helping others to find that passion within them.
Yeah. And I think we always say here that it's our responsibility to assist them in becoming better business people. And so for each one of them, that means something entirely different. Maybe they're not great with, IT stuff, or maybe the finance thing eludes them, and getting them to where they feel comfortable as a business owner saying, hey, this is not my strength. I try to be very transparent to let people know that we all have weaknesses. Everybody knows that the technical part of the business for me is not what my strength is. So, a lot of our guys can sit here and rattle off part numbers and all that. And I'm just like, but that's, I think, where it's kind of a good thing because they realize, yeah, we know you don't have that, but everybody doesn't have something. And do we either hire somebody to fill that void, or do we educate ourselves, or we work with our franchisor? And so we're always trying to we have on our intranet site, we use FranConnect, we have what we call PIRTEK University. So we have like 77, I think now, 2 to 5 minute videos about all kinds of topics, from safety to what is a break even. Because maybe they don't want to ask that question because they're too embarrassed to, but it gives them a mode of, and they can watch it over and over again, of all these different topics so that they can start filling in whatever that gap is.
It's interesting because I think these smaller pieces where you do a training on this and it lasts 3 minutes and I got it, and this one 3 minutes, because I think in the past we as franchisors gave the water hose sort of training, right? It's all at one time. You got 2 weeks and have at it kind of thing. And I somehow I believe there's a saturation point where the brain can only handle so much learning at one time. And like you also said, there's a part of us that may not want to ask that one question. If we can go to a 10-minute video and learn a little bit about it within our own time frame when we are ready to learn that, I think franchisors are learning that we do have to give it in smaller pieces, rather than that water hose approach.
Yeah, but it's also their time, like especially when they're a new owner, they're wearing all the hats, right? And so they're probably, it's at 10 o'clock at night that they're sitting down and going, I have no idea what you're asking me on this financial question, right? And so we wanted to give them some kind of option also to be repetitive, so that, if they didn't get it the first time, maybe they can go back. So that's been we started that in 2020, and that continues to grow and, be refined and everything, because we have people from, if I think about the financial part, we have people that have never balanced a checkbook to people that were CFOs of private equity companies. So you also have that wide gamut that you're trying to cover with people of their knowledge level. And so that's always, I think in any franchise system, that's probably a struggle as well.
Yeah, I think it also helps our in-field consultants, where they can't always cover everything, and they're going from franchisee to franchisee to support them. And here the questions are all answered. Do you mind if I shift gears just a minute?
Sure.
So when you look back at your life, was there a pivotal moment, like a lesson you learned, a sage person, an oracle of sorts that came into your life, that gave you a piece of advice, a book you read, a traumatic experience you went through that you feel was pivotal and really helped form who you are today?
That's a big, big question. I can't say that there's one. I think there's been multiple, as I don't mind saying I'm 56 years old. So when you reach this age, you realize that there were pivotal moments probably when certain things happened. I think obviously when I made the move to PIRTEK from US Lawns, I'm just be honest, this is the one I could think of the most quickly, is that I was getting ready to turn 50, right? So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do something different, I better get on with it, right? So the clock was ticking. But I think I've always been on the journey, so I think it just maybe, I might have been, I guess some people would consider a late bloomer, but I think it's just the way that I did things, so I don't know. I try not to look back on the past too much, because I think then I could go to regrets, and I try not to focus on that. I say, what can I do now going forward?
Okay, I could hug you right now, because I call myself a late bloomer also. And I think we should just, have a whole series on that, or a book on that, where people come into their own at a later stage. We don't know who we are early on, or what we want, or what the heck life is throwing at us. And then we finish well, right? We finish well. So kind of a late bloomer.
I say, don't give up, right? Don't say just because I'm going to be 50, I can't do anything different, right? I wanted to, honestly, just to be really honest, my goal was to be a CFO. That was my goal. Always, always. I never thought about being a CEO at all.
And here you are. Ta-da!
Yeah. Surprise.
Yeah, God had other plans for you, bigger plans.
Yeah,
for sure. So I want to make sure that people know how to get hold of you, and also to learn more about PIRTEK. I think you perked my interest about your company. How would they get hold of you? How would they learn more?
Well, of course, PIRTEK USA is all the usual venues. Our website, www.pirtekusa.com. Don't forget the USA part, because we're the USA. And also we're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. They make me be on Instagram, but I'm not the best at it. I have to admit, I'm more of a LinkedIn person, a good, bad, or indifferent. And I'm not a Twitter person, but PIRTEK USA is on all of those. So whatever fits the person's fancy, I guess you would say. So we try to be very active on our social media, which is something that's been different in our company for the last 5 years. So there's a lot out there that they could find out about us.
Yeah. Tracy, do you have any final thoughts about Kim? I got like a million thoughts running in my head, but I want to give you a chance because I keep talking over you.
It's just so wonderful to see a company growing and still keeping those family values, those deep values infused. I just love that. And I love hearing about the growth, and I'm going to be watching the growth. It's exciting to me.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. We appreciate that.
And Kim, I think what I hit home run for me, besides your late bloomer like me, is this idea that we can't put people in a bucket. You're a CPA, you were a spreadsheet person, and yet you've developed these incredible people and relational skills. So we have to make sure we don't throw people in buckets, because you've proven you're not just CFO material, you're CEO material. And a lot of what a CEO does is the strategic big picture, which means it's both people side of the business as well as the number side of the business. And you have both. So before we take off, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for making time, especially this close to Christmas. And we really, really appreciate you coming.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
So, and for those of you listening in to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide and profits are made and relationships are forged, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on another episode.